After months of eerie silence, Prince Andrew re-emerged in a setting no one anticipated, haunted eyes, heavy shoulders, and a message that would rattle the palace gates. Behind closed doors, he had been preparing something explosive. The former duke was done hiding. He was ready to speak, but the monarchy wasn't ready to listen. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It wasn't scheduled, and yet it happened. In the midst of a quiet afternoon at Buckingham Palace, an unannounced private council meeting suddenly included a face long absent from royal deliberations, Prince Andrew. The man once known as the Queen's favourite arrived not with fanfare, but with a stillness that spoke louder than words. There were no handlers, no pre-cleared agenda, just Andrew, his silence, and a heavy envelope clutched in his hand. What followed would stun every senior figure in attendance, not because it was loud or confrontational, but because it was calculated, intentional, and simmering with unspoken history. The source who leaked the account from the chamber said Andrew's demeanour was calm, but it was the kind of calm that only comes from a storm long brewing beneath the surface. His words were few in the opening minutes. Most of the attention centred on the sealed envelope he brought, marked clearly and boldly, "For His Majesty's eyes only." That envelope, according to those present, never left his grip. It wasn't handed over. Not yet. It was a symbol, a threat, a reminder that even if stripped of title and function, he was still, by blood, a royal. He was still Charles's brother. Observers who caught a glimpse of Andrew that day described him as unrecognizable, not in appearance, though the signs of time and pressure were written into his face, but in posture. This was not the same man who once walked with entitlement. This was a man carrying a burden, one who had lost everything, but still clung to something deeper. His silence with the press gathered outside spoke volumes. No smiles, no comments, just a slow walk into the shadows of a family that had tried to forget him. The tension between Andrew and King Charles wasn't new, but it had grown quieter, colder, and more dangerous. Since the stripping of titles and the public exile, their conversations, if they happened at all, were described as minimal and strained. Sources close to the family hinted that Charles had made peace with keeping his brother at a distance. But Andrew clearly hadn't. The meeting wasn't just about logistics. It was personal. He was there to confront the silence. And perhaps the most tragic element in this storm was the quiet role of Princess Beatrice. Behind palace walls, unconfirmed reports suggest she begged her father not to attend the meeting, that reopening wounds would only make them worse, that the monarchy had already moved on. But Andrew wouldn't be deterred. Not now. Not after everything. Not when he had one card left to play. His voice, his bloodline. But the room fell into stunned silence when Prince Andrew opened his mouth and uttered the words that would fracture the very fabric of royal brotherhood. No one expected a speech. But what came from Prince Andrew's mouth wasn't just a statement, it was a cry from the shadows. "I am the king's blood," he declared. A plea, a protest, a threat. And yet, the stone-faced committee did not move. What did Andrew know? And what had he just triggered? His voice didn't shake, but there was something jagged beneath every word, an undertone of desperation laced with indignation. "I was born of the crown. My blood runs from the same sovereign line. You cannot exile what belongs to the throne." The silence that followed was as damning as any rejection. His words hung in the air like smoke in a sealed room, choking those too afraid to respond. For a moment, it wasn't a disgraced duke standing there. It was a man demanding recognition not through titles or favours, but through lineage. The audacity was breathtaking, the pain undeniable, the fury in his eyes restrained but deadly. Those closest to the inner circle couldn't hide their reactions. Prince Edward stiffened, his brow furrowed in disbelief. Princess Anne's face, often unreadable, gave way to a flash of restrained rage. And Queen Camilla, seated furthest from Andrew, reportedly leaned toward one of her aides and whispered something sharp enough to draw a second glance from Catherine. No one interrupted him. No one dared to. because what he said, and how he said it, struck at the very bones of the institution. "I am the king's blood" wasn't just a declaration, it was a challenge to the new hierarchy forming around Charles's reign. That phrase alone carried with it centuries of power struggles. In the royal family, blood isn't just a matter of biology, it's currency. It defines inheritance, legitimacy, succession, and yet, for the first time in modern memory, it seemed to mean nothing. Andrew invoked it as a shield. The committee saw it as a weapon. In that moment, the struggle between bloodline and public duty erupted without a single raised voice. He saw himself as born into a position that could not be revoked. They saw a man clinging to fading privilege in an age where morality had replaced monarchy as the final judge. King Charles didn't speak, but those watching him closely noted the way his hand tightened on the edge of the table, white-knuckled, unmoving. He didn't make eye contact with Andrew. Not once. And that silence from the king, the one person who could end this, spoke volumes. It was abandonment veiled as restraint. But others in the room began to stir. A quiet hum, murmurs between the committee members. Some shifting uncomfortably, others already scribbling notes. One reached for their phone beneath the table. The speech hadn't ended, but the calculations had begun. Not about Andrew's words, but what they might mean if the public ever heard them. And so, as the final syllables of Andrew's declaration echoed against centuries of tradition, he stood defiant, unblinking, waiting. But it wasn't his words alone that shook the foundation, it was what followed. A formal request that would drag the monarchy into scandal once more. Prince Andrew didn't just want recognition, he wanted his status back. He formally requested full royal protection be reinstated. The Royal Protection Committee was stunned. Could a disgraced royal claim such privileges simply by birthright? What followed was a cold and calculated pushback that turned brother against brother. It wasn't long after his emotional declaration that the request arrived, delivered not through the press or even public statement, but through a sealed memorandum routed via private channels to the palace's most confidential review body. It wasn't a plea. It was a demand veiled in entitlement. Andrew argued that his lineage, his proximity to the sovereign, and the potential threats he faced as a senior royal even in exile warranted full reinstatement of royal protection. "I was born into service," the document read. "That service has no off switch." In his mind, being royal wasn't something that could be undone by scandal. It was blood. It was legacy. And above all, it was permanent. But the Royal Protection Committee wasn't prepared to entertain the request without scrutiny. Immediately, the room fractured into factions, those who believed in preserving tradition and those who now feared the consequences of ignoring public sentiment. The optics were impossible to ignore. To grant Andrew protection meant justifying taxpayer-funded security for a man who had become a symbol of disgrace. Yet to deny him outright was to question the very meaning of royal birthright. That tension wasn't just legal, it was emotional. It was historic. The most ferocious resistance, according to insider reports, came from Queen Camilla. Behind closed doors, she reportedly tore into the proposal, calling it tone-deaf, reckless, and a betrayal of the institution's effort to rebuild. She didn't mince words. Sources claim she warned that the moment Andrew received a single royal privilege again, the public trust would collapse, dragging Charles with it. And while the king remained outwardly neutral, those watching saw a shift in his posture. A familiar grimness returned to his face. He was being pulled into a war he thought he'd already ended. The palace's legal team was summoned almost immediately. Their task? Determine whether any constitutional precedent existed that could justify Andrew's reinstatement. The results weren't comforting. Royal protections, it turned out, were murky in legality, shaped more by convention than codified rule. That ambiguity left the final decision not in the hands of lawyers, but in the court of power dynamics, and that court was anything but stable. Then came the breaking point. Princess Anne, a pillar of royal duty and discipline, reportedly rose from her seat, and walked out of the chamber mid-debate. Her message was clear. This argument shouldn't be happening, that the fact Andrew had gotten this far, this close to reinstatement, was already a failure of judgment. For Anne, loyalty to the crown had always meant protecting its dignity, and to her, Andrew's return was an open wound festering beneath ceremonial silence. But behind the committee's stiff rejection lay something darker, an orchestrated effort to erase Andrew's influence entirely, no matter the emotional cost. While Andrew pleaded for protection, another operation had already begun. Codenamed Eclipse, it was a high-level strategy designed to erase the remaining influence of the king's disgraced brother, silently, irreversibly, and permanently. No public statements, just quiet elimination. The plan wasn't born overnight. Its roots stretched back to the aftermath of the 2022 scandal fallout, when whispers turned to panic and internal meetings shifted from damage control to future-proofing. At first, it was just a suggestion, a quiet conversation among senior aides about limiting Andrew's visibility, but the mood hardened. Reputation was no longer something to protect. It was something to cleanse. Eclipse was coined not as a metaphor, but as a mission, to cast a long, permanent shadow over Andrew, blotting out what remained of his royal presence. Private meetings intensified behind palace walls. Confidential briefings became routine, and the royal family's security apparatus, normally reserved for defending the institution from external threats, was subtly redirected. Intelligence firms were consulted, not just for surveillance but for strategy. Their job? Track Andrew's movements, monitor his communications, anticipate his alliances. The goal wasn't to destroy him publicly, it was to suffocate his relevance without a single headline. Frozen accounts, revoked clearance, denied access to family gatherings under the guise of logistics. It wasn't exile, it was erasure. Queen Camilla's inner circle reportedly played the most aggressive role. Her advisors, already wary of any potential resurgence, pushed hard for total severance. They argued that as long as Andrew retained even a sliver of privilege, the crown's image remained contaminated. They weren't subtle. Multiple sources confirm that Camilla's team spearheaded the campaign to block Andrew's presence from ceremonial rosters, exclude him from official Christmas photos, and quietly revise protocols that once guaranteed him a seat at state events. It was scorched earth politics, but done with a velvet glove. The operation didn't rely on public scandal, it thrived on silence. Whisper campaigns were launched within diplomatic circles and extended family networks. Anyone attempting to reintroduce Andrew into royal proximity, whether through charity work, private events, or symbolic gestures, was met with a firm but discreet warning. His name was no longer to be spoken within the realm of protocol. At one point, a leaked memo to event coordinators reportedly referred to him only as the severed branch. He had become an institutional ghost. Then came the documents. Leaked papers, redacted but explosive, suggested the true reach of Eclipse. Not only was Andrew's security detail permanently withdrawn, but internal efforts were made to stall any financial resources tied to royal trusts. His travel records were being flagged, his requests stalled or denied without explanation. Even charitable foundations once linked to his name were quietly dissolved or redirected under new leadership. The plan was working, and it was happening without a single press conference. Through it all, King Charles remained curiously quiet. Conflicted, some say. Others claim he sanctioned it in silence, letting Camilla and her strategists carry out what he himself could never do publicly. His reluctance was noted but irrelevant. Eclipse didn't require his voice, only his consent. And with each passing day, Andrew's shadow grew dimmer. But Andrew had anticipated resistance, and what he revealed next would leave the room reeling, dragging in another royal and igniting a second firestorm. The monarchy didn't expect anyone to side with Andrew. But then, Princess Beatrice stepped into the arena. With trembling hands and defiant eyes, she delivered a message on behalf of her father, and in doing so, risked her own royal future. What she said would shake the Royal Women's Alliance to its core. Her arrival was unannounced, unsanctioned, and deeply unwelcome. Intercepted by palace aides before she reached the inner chamber, Beatrice reportedly refused to wait or withdraw. She carried no prepared notes, no official letter, only conviction. "I will not stand outside the gates of a family I was born into," she said, before being reluctantly allowed into the conversation already boiling behind the scenes. The committee was stunned. She wasn't there as a princess, but as a daughter fighting not to rewrite the past, but to salvage what remained of her father's place in their world. She spoke carefully, but her voice trembled under the weight of emotion. "My father deserves protection," she began, "not for who he was, but who he still is." There was no attempt to erase his wrongs, no denial. But her plea was grounded in something deeper: loyalty, blood, memory. She reminded them that Andrew had once stood at the front lines of duty, that he had bled for the crown in ways few had, and that the concept of royal protection should not be applied selectively like a political weapon. Her words didn't seek forgiveness, they demanded recognition. And that demand cut like a blade through the icy detachment that had settled over the committee. But not everyone agreed with her courage. In private, a divide had already opened between Beatrice and her sister, Princess Eugenie. While Beatrice was willing to publicly risk her position, Eugenie chose silence, believing their father's path was his to walk alone. The sisters, once inseparable in their quiet defiance of the spotlight, now stood on opposite ends of a moral divide. And for Beatrice, that solitude made her stance even more dangerous. Rumours quickly spread that Catherine, Princess of Wales, quietly exited the room during Beatrice's speech. But her departure spoke volumes. For Catherine to withdraw from a moment so fraught with emotion signalled more than neutrality. It signalled disapproval from the future queen consort, and with it, the weight of modern royal expectations. The institution could no longer afford personal sympathies. The confrontation that followed between Beatrice and Queen Camilla happened away from the meeting table but carried the weight of history. In a corridor lined with royal portraits, the Queen allegedly turned to Beatrice and whispered with chilling precision, "Your loyalty may cost you everything." It was not a threat, it was a verdict. And it landed with the force of someone who had climbed her way into power and now intended to guard it with ruthless resolve. And just when the royal family thought it couldn't splinter any further, Prince William stepped in and delivered a message that would mark the final blow. Prince William didn't shout, he didn't accuse. But his message to the committee was unwavering. The crown must not waver. It wasn't just about Andrew anymore. It was about survival. And in those words, a chilling new standard was set. Blood no longer guarantees loyalty or protection. His entrance into the debate wasn't immediate, but when he did speak, the atmosphere shifted. No longer a room weighed down by emotional pleas or whispered alliances, but a chamber of reckoning. William, the heir to the throne, carried with him not just his title, but a new philosophy, one rooted in duty, reputation, and consequence. He didn't point fingers, but his silence toward Beatrice said enough. His words, however calm, cut deeper than any confrontation. "If we redefine accountability," he said, "we redefine the crown. And once we do that, we unravel everything that still holds us together." Those closest to the committee knew William's position had been hardening over time. His relationship with Andrew had frayed long before the public scandal exploded, dating back to private moments no one would speak of openly. The family dinners, the ignored texts, the long silences in rooms filled with titles but devoid of trust. William had chosen a different path, a forward-facing monarchy, one shaped not by forgiveness, but by resilience. And now, standing at the helm of generational transition, he made it clear, sentimentality would not guide the future. Behind closed doors, his discussion with King Charles was described as brief but powerful. It wasn't a plea, it was a line drawn. Reports say William told his father plainly that any step toward reinstating Andrew would send a message the monarchy might never recover from. That public forgiveness, when not earned, curdles into institutional rot. That the monarchy could not survive another fracture, not from scandal, but from weakness. And Charles, already buckling under the weight of divided loyalties, said nothing in return. The irony was unmistakable. The same palace that once shielded Harry and Meghan found itself using their absence as precedent. "We did not bend for them," one advisor reportedly said. "We cannot bend for him." The unspoken rule was now written in stone. There would be no exceptions, no restorations, not even for a brother. And yet, even as the vote neared its conclusion, those in the room could feel the strain pressing down on the king, a father watching his family splinter, a brother bound by silence, a monarch forced to choose between justice and kin. The vote passed swiftly. Andrew's request was denied, not with outrage, but with a chilling clarity that echoed William's resolve. The Crown had spoken, and this time it was louder than blood. But just as the committee voted to reject the plea, a letter surfaced, one Andrew had kept hidden, one that bore the late Queen's signature. She was gone, but her words returned at the exact moment everything was collapsing. A letter from Queen Elizabeth II, sealed and marked for future crisis, was read aloud. Its contents? A heartbreaking appeal that no one was prepared to hear, and one that the king refused to obey. The envelope was faded, its seal still intact, and its timing nothing short of eerie. As if the late Queen had foreseen the reckoning to come, she had left behind one final message deliberately withheld until the very hour when the monarchy stood on the edge of fracture. The letter, believed to have been written in the final year of her reign, was direct yet tender. It spoke of legacy, of the weight of lineage, and above all, of unity. But it was one line in particular that tore through the silence of that chamber like a blade. "No son of mine should be cast out so completely that he forgets he was born of love and duty both." She called Andrew's condition a spiritual exile, a state she feared would harden not just him, but the crown itself. Her plea wasn't for pardoning, it was for humanity. She warned that if the monarchy continued down the path of cold institutionalism, it would one day lose the very thing that set it apart, the ability to embrace, even in conflict. Her signature, steady and unmistakable, anchored her words with the full gravity of a monarch who had reigned over decades of crisis and still believed reconciliation was power, not weakness. King Charles reportedly broke down as the letter was read aloud. Witnesses described him as frozen at first, then quietly wiping tears from his face. But he didn't speak. He didn't look at Andrew, and he didn't change his mind. That silence, once more, was louder than any declaration. In that moment, the crown's heart beat louder than its conscience. Tradition, duty, survival, all of it weighed against a mother's final plea, and still, Charles chose the path already laid before him. Not everyone in the room accepted that choice so easily. Camilla, who had stood unflinching through every debate until then, allegedly rose without a word and left the chamber. No explanation. Just quiet retreat. Whether it was out of protest or exhaustion, no one could confirm. But her absence shook the illusion of unity. Some committee members began to murmur, their resolve beginning to crack. For a brief moment, it seemed the Queen's words might change everything. But then the leak happened. Word of the letter's existence slipped into the press. Tabloids seized the story like vultures, splashing headlines across the world. The Queen begged for Andrew's return. Public outrage ignited, some demanding her wishes be honoured, others furious that a scandalised royal could still command such sympathy from beyond the grave. The palace scrambled to contain the narrative, but it was too late. The ghost of the Queen had entered the court of public opinion, and that court was divided. Within the committee, a final debate erupted. Did a monarch's last request carry more weight than the people's will? Did legacy trump the reality of a modern monarchy under siege? The room, once ruled by icy certainty, now trembled under the weight of contradiction. The past had spoken, the present stood divided, and the future demanded an answer. But nothing could stop what came next, the official and irreversible verdict that would redefine Andrew's future and send shockwaves through royal history. With a single document, it was over. The Royal Protection Committee, with the King's silent approval, rejected Andrew's plea and stripped him of all remaining ceremonial protections. But what followed wasn't just administrative, it was deeply personal. The crown had made its choice, and Andrew was no longer in its shadow. The language of the final decision was as cold as it was conclusive. There was no room for interpretation, no softness in tone. The document, signed by the committee and countersigned by the Privy Council, stated clearly that His Royal Highness, Prince Andrew, shall no longer be entitled to state-funded protection, ceremonial presence at public royal events, nor access to Crown-affiliated residences or functions, effective immediately. The phrase "in perpetuity" was deliberately included, ensuring that even future monarchs would find it difficult to reverse. It wasn't a decision. It was a burial. The shift happened fast. Within hours, Andrew's remaining bodyguards, those few who had accompanied him under restricted terms, were reassigned. Their exit was not dramatic, but it was visible. They did not salute. They simply left. Shortly afterward, his clearance was pulled from multiple royal estates, including Windsor and Sandringham. Every code, every protocol, revoked. Palace staff, instructed to remain neutral, escorted him quietly out of the private wing. No handshakes, no goodbyes, just the sound of footsteps echoing through corridors that had once belonged to him. He didn't speak to the cameras, but a recording leaked later captured his final private words, reportedly made as he walked through a side exit. "I was born into it, and now it has buried me." Those words swept through the media like wildfire. Within minutes, social platforms erupted. Some called the decision brave, necessary and overdue statement that the monarchy was no longer a sanctuary for scandal. Others were horrified. To them, the crown had become a machine too ruthless to distinguish redemption from reputation. For the first time in generations, the royal family appeared almost too human, fractured, political, unforgiving. What struck many observers wasn't just Andrew's absence, but who appeared next. Catherine, Princess of Wales, emerged in a public engagement mere hours after the announcement. Dressed with quiet authority and speaking on family values and the strength of institutional trust, her presence was no accident. It was a message. The monarchy was looking ahead, not behind. Where once unity meant protection of all, now it meant protecting only the future. She didn't mention Andrew. She didn't need to. Her silence, poised and deliberate, made the palace's position crystal clear. And just like that, the door closed not just on a chapter, but on a royal identity that had once stood second in line to the throne. Andrew had been written out not with fury, but with precision. And while his name would remain in the records, his role had vanished, like ink washed from parchment. But the monarchy's cold resolve sparked a chilling question in the minds of millions. If they could silence the king's own brother, who would be next? "I am the king's blood," a cry once meant to restore protection, has now become a warning etched in royal stone. As the monarchy moves forward, a new rule has emerged. Blood does not shield, titles do not forgive, and loyalty is conditional. In this new era, who remains safe? The decision to sever Prince Andrew from royal privilege may have been quiet in tone, but its aftershocks were deafening. Within days, the internal structure of the monarchy began to shift, not in explosive moments, but in calculated movements of power. What emerged was not just a family recovering from scandal, but an institution redefining its hierarchy in real time. Those who remained loyal to the future, to the image, and to the crown, not the bloodline, found themselves elevated, spotlighted, and entrusted. And those who strayed or even hesitated began to fade. Catherine, William, and Princess Anne, three figures who had already carried much of the monarchy's modern identity, were now seen as the ultimate custodians of the crown. Their appearances multiplied, their influence deepened. They became not only symbols of continuity, but enforcers of the new royal code, unwavering dedication above personal ties. This wasn't just about surviving the present, it was about fortifying the future, a future in which personal scandal, however rooted in royal lineage, had no home in the public-facing monarchy. Meanwhile, Princess Beatrice, once a quiet royal with growing public affection, began to retreat. Her appearances were scaled back, invitations ceased. The cameras no longer sought her, and the palace no longer pushed her forward. Rumours swirled of a quiet exile not declared, but practiced. Internal punishment disguised as withdrawal. Some said she had broken a rule not yet written. Don't challenge the crown's direction, even in defence of your own father. But as individual figures rose or fell, something deeper was taking shape, something less visible but far more influential. The rise of constitutional advisors, image consultants, and private legal teams began to mold the monarchy's decisions more than ever before. Power was no longer just about birth or title. It had become transactional, political, and external. An invisible class of strategists now played chess with royal names, deciding who would represent, who would be silenced, and who would be erased. Outside the gates, the public remained torn. For some, this was the cleansing they had long demanded, a decisive break from the old royal world where privilege excused misconduct. For others, it was a betrayal of the very essence of monarchy: blood, family, and forgiveness. The divide between the monarchy's traditional base and its new modern image widened with every step forward. And in that divide, something was lost irretrievably. Because while the institution may have secured its surface, tightened its circle, and burnished its legacy, it did so by cutting off one of its own, not for treason, not for rebellion, but for the crime of being too flawed, too controversial, too human. In doing so, the monarchy saved its image, but it lost a brother. The crown may shine brighter than ever, but behind its polished glow now lies a shadow that whispers, "Even the king's blood is expendable." Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.